You have exactly 60 minutes to clear out your desk, Justin, make it fast. The voice of Director Vance cut through the open office floor like a blade. The entire room instantly went dead silent, every single analyst freezing at their keyboard while pretending not to look at me. I calmly closed my laptop, slid my coffee mug aside, and looked up at her with complete composure. Director Vance leaned against my workspace with a smug, heavy smile, clearly enjoying the public spectacle she had created. She whispered that I was simply too weak to survive in a high-stakes environment like this. I stared back at her for a moment, keeping my voice perfectly flat as I asked her to clarify the exact administrative grounds for my sudden dismissal. She merely shrugged her shoulders, telling me that HR would email the paperwork later, and that I should just leave quietly without making a scene. I nodded slowly, reaching into my desk drawer to pack my personal notebooks, my fountain pen, and my leather folio. However, I deliberately left behind the electronic master key, which was the one thing that truly mattered. As I walked toward the main elevators, a wave of tense whispering broke out among my former colleagues. Nobody dared to speak up in my defense, not even Caleb, a junior designer whose apartment rent I had personally covered 3 months ago. That was the exact moment I realized Director Vance had absolutely no idea who she was actually dealing with. Instead of driving straight to my apartment, I navigated toward a hidden private office located 3 blocks away from the corporate headquarters. For over a year, I had been secretly archiving every single fraudulent transaction, unauthorized contract, and shadow email that Director Vance had signed using my digital authorization. They thought I was just an ordinary, disposable project manager. The reality was that I was the original co-founder and major seed investor of this entire enterprise, before my former partner pushed me into the background through artificial stock dilution and fabricated performance reviews. They believed they had completely erased my presence from the firm, but they forgot a critical detail. I was the person who designed the core architecture of the network. I logged into the internal security mainframe and saw that Director Vance had already instructed human resources to classify my exit as involuntary misconduct. This dirty corporate tactic effectively froze my corporate equity and blocked any standard severance appeals. It was a clever legal trap, but it was nowhere near clever enough to stop what I had already set in motion. I opened my secure legal encrypted archive and forwarded the master file to a highly confidential inbox. This data drop went directly to my personal attorney and to major boardroom stakeholders who had already grown deeply suspicious of leadership. The file was labeled Project Downfall. By the time I walked out into the night, the final corporate trap had been sprung. The next morning at exactly 9 o'clock, I walked through the front entrance of the glass tower, wearing a tailored charcoal suit. The receptionist failed to recognize me entirely as I bypassed the main desk and headed straight toward the executive elevators. Just then, Director Vance stepped out holding a morning latte, her usual arrogant smile fully active. She stopped dead in her tracks when she noticed me, blinking in utter confusion, as if trying to comprehend how I was standing there after being wiped from the corporate directory. I offered her a polite smile and suggested she cancel her upcoming morning strategy meeting. Before she could utter a single word, corporate board member Arthur Pendleton stepped out from the adjacent conference room. Arthur looked directly at Director Vance and formally requested that she immediately surrender all company-issued devices and laptops. He informed her that her executive directorship was officially suspended effective immediately, pending a full forensic investigation. Her jaw dropped in shock as she stammered, demanding to know on what legal authority they were removing her from the building. Arthur explained that I had officially triggered the emergency founder override clause embedded deep within the original corporate charter. I stepped into the elevator alone and pressed the button for the top-floor penthouse suite, an executive level I had not set foot on in over 3 long years. Director Vance screamed furiously as the heavy doors closed. The executive floor was completely silent, constructed entirely of cold steel and reflective glass. I walked down the long corridor toward the corner office belonging to Logan Thorne, my former best friend and co-founder who had secretly sold his loyalty to our competitors. He looked up from his desk, turning incredibly pale the moment he saw me walk through his door. I slammed my leather folio directly onto his mahogany desk, revealing internal messages and a flash drive containing video evidence of him plotting my corporate removal. Logan tried to claim it was some kind of misunderstanding, but his hands were shaking violently as he looked at the timestamps. I reminded him that he forged my signature while I was away attending my mother's funeral. Logan opened his mouth to lie, but no words came out as he realized his entire career was effectively finished. Arthur Pendleton entered the room with 2 security guards, ordering Logan to gather his things and vacate the premises immediately. As he stood up with hollow eyes, I told him that I would have shared everything with him, but he chose betrayal instead. Once the room cleared out, I noticed a strange, unlabeled blue folder hidden away in the bottom drawer of Logan's desk. I pulled it open and discovered signed resignation letters from 6 of our top department heads, all dated for the following morning. Logan had been secretly planning a mass employee exodus to completely paralyze our operations right after my return. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized this corporate warfare was far deeper and more dangerous than a simple ego clash. I immediately used the intercom to call an emergency meeting with our principal stakeholders, Ava and Harrison. Logan thought he could completely sink the company on his way out, but I possessed a devastating secret from our early days in Seattle. An hour later, the main boardroom was completely dead silent as 12 prominent board members stared at the documents I placed on the table. I looked directly at Logan and asked him to explain a specific offshore transaction from several years ago that never appeared in our financial audits. Logan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a sudden look of pure terror washing over his face. I produced verified bank statements proving Logan had accepted a massive 7-figure bribe from our primary competitor to intentionally kill a lucrative corporate merger. He desperately claimed the accusations were completely fabricated, but I pointed out that the federal government had already initiated a quiet inquiry into his shell corporations. The board members turned on him instantly with disgusted expressions. Ava stood up and officially announced that Logan Thorne was stripped of all titles and voting rights, pending immediate criminal prosecution. Logan tried to argue as security took him by the arms, but I looked him dead in the eyes and told him it was over. His chair was still spinning as the heavy boardroom doors slammed shut behind him. I turned back to the remaining board members, explaining that while business requires compromise, some ethical lines can never be crossed. I opened my briefcase to reveal a secondary, deeply personal file containing our new corporate restructuring blueprint. I founded this enterprise based on principles of absolute integrity, and I was going to ensure we established strict independent oversight moving forward. Most of the room nodded in immediate agreement, but our Vice President of Strategy, Trevor, looked completely terrified as he stared at the paperwork. I had included a surveillance photo showing Trevor secretly exchanging confidential company documents with Logan a few months prior. I locked eyes with Trevor across the table and quietly advised him not to run. Later that evening, I stood on the balcony of my quiet apartment, watching the distant city lights flicker in the dark. I received a single text message from an unlisted number asking me if I truly believed this battle was over. It was a classic, desperate intimidation tactic from Logan's remaining allies, but I felt absolutely no fear because I was completely prepared. The following morning, a massive crowd of journalists and news cameras gathered inside our main lobby for a live press conference. Ava stepped up to the microphone and formally announced that the company was launching a full public audit into years of executive embezzlement and corporate conspiracy. The media erupted into chaos as the truth finally came to light. Late that night, a final message arrived from Ava confirming that the corporate housecleaning was completely finished and our reputation was secure. I leaned back in my chair and finally let out a deep breath as a sense of genuine peace settled over me. They completely underestimated my silence, and that silence was exactly where my victory had been won.